I'm Jessica Wilson, and you're listening to Making It Awkward. Let's do a quick warm-up before we get the show started.
4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mama made me mash my M&M.
Red leather, red leather, yellow leather.
Today, I'm delighted to have two theater nerds on the show. Stephanie Lexis, founder of the Body Positivity Project, and Libby Parker, also known as the Broadway Dietitian and author of Permission to Eat, have joined me. We talk about what actors face when trying to get cast in the theater and on Broadway, and all the ways their bodies are scrutinized and judged. We also get into the role of a dietitian whose clients are exercising constantly and who need to eat meals after most people have gone to sleep. Libby calls her clients theater athletes. But first, a quick thank you to the newest Patreon supporters who are keeping this project sustainable. All Patreon members can check out the full video of the vocal warm-ups from today, and also Libby's improv song about eating enough food.
What good is melody? What good is music if you won't let yourself eat sweets?
Lastly, thanks to Abby028 for the recent review. And with that, let's get into it. Stephanie and Libby, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Why don't you two introduce yourselves to get us going?
Well, hi, I'm Stephanie Lexis. I am a multitude of things. I'm an actress, singer, songwriter, comedian, music video director, aspiring novelist and screenwriter, audition coach, other things. And I also run Broadway Body Positivity Project, which is my small business that advocates and educates the theater industry about body liberation.
Excellent. Thank you. Libby, what about you?
Similarly, I wear lots of hats and do all the things, slightly differently though. So like you, Jessica, I'm a registered dietitian. I've been working primarily in the field of eating disorders for my whole career. And my niche now is I'm the Broadway dietitian. I help people who work in the theater industry, whether on stage or backstage, with their health and nutrition from a weight inclusive stance. So really using the eating disorder skills. But similar to Stephanie, I do all the different things. So I have and am a business owner. I act. I did a lot of musical theater. I grew up dancing. I've written a couple books. I'm working on another one. I usually hold down multiple jobs at a time. I teach at a college. I do a lot of things. I don't know. I do all the things.
So many things.
Yeah.
So I have been to shows on Broadway, but I have no idea how they work behind the scenes, auditions that are not tryouts, which is what I want to call them. Stephanie, can you break down all the steps before somebody steps on that stage?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just wanted to point out that while I have Broadway in my name and Libby has Broadway in her business name, we educate on behalf of the entire theater industry. I try not to be so Broadway centric because there's incredible theater happening everywhere. And also I have a lot of maybe some ethical issues with Broadway as an industry or like any type of mainstream commercialized theater industry. But it's such a long process. It depends on if you're talking about starting a new show, like writing a show from scratch. That could take years. You know, you have to do workshops.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find people who are going to fund the show. And then eventually, if you have enough funding and you have a theater that can house the show, you have to finally establish your creative team. You have to cast the show. You have rehearsals, costume fittings, advertising. And then usually with like a Broadway show, not all the time, there will be like a tryout in another like area city, like maybe like Boston or something. Mm-hmm. And then it'll come to the city or maybe it starts off Broadway, mm-hmm. which are, they're usually smaller theaters, but they may transfer mm-hmm. over. And then hopefully people buy tickets and people see the show and it gets to stay there for a while.
Right. Can you tell me, one or both of you, about the body stuff that shows up in like auditions and who's selected? I assume selected or cast. That's probably the, and you can give me all of the, all of the words and all of the terms. Where like the body things tend to come up.
Such a big one. I'll start and then Steph, you can maybe fill in a little more personal experience on this. So we both obviously come from performing backgrounds as well, but Oh, where the body stuff comes in. I feel like we're finally starting to see some changes in more diverse casting across the board, both with body sizes, races, ethnicities, transgender. We're starting to see, and disabilities, we're seeing a little more movement. Still a long ways to go, but we're seeing some movement. But traditionally, there is kind of a quote unquote Broadway body type that is seen a lot in casting, which is a very, for a typical role or for like an ensemble role, they would be like a very lean, probably tall, muscular person. And a lot of the older shows are very gender binary in their roles and casting as well. And then there's also how the role was initially cast. So frequently you're going to see shows cast it, like if they're bringing in new people to an existing show, or if they're putting up a show that's been previously done, they're going to try typically to have people fill those roles that look like the original cast. So that means that if you have, I'm going to make this real simple. Like if you have a blonde woman playing this role in this show, you're going to have a blonde woman playing this role in this show, and they're going to look pretty darn similar. Obviously hair, I'm just using that as an example, on Broadway and, bigger shows, they're going to have wigs for everybody. So that's not a good example, but in community theater or something, they might not. So that typically goes to body size is what we're looking at when we're seeing these shows being recast. So that does show up a lot in the audition rooms as well. There's something called typing in acting. So whether this is for theater or film, typing is when, as actors, we are told we need to kind of type ourselves to know which roles we're going out for. What roles do we feel we would be cast in based on appearance alone? So before they see us act, say anything, move, just from our headshot or from a full body photo, or when we walk in the room before we've made any movement or sound, what do they immediately envision we would be cast as? Like, are we the sweet little ingenue girl next door? Are we the like gritty biker person? Are we the villain? Are we really, look really young and play children into our 40s? Are, like they're really looking at those different types, they call it. So often, especially at higher levels of performance, so, thinking Broadway professional shows, things like that, the actors that are going in for these roles typically have either typed themselves for that role based on what the previous casting has been, or their agents would have said, you're going to go out for these roles because this is what type you would go in for. And, obviously certain people will go in for auditions that don't look the type. And sometimes they will have full, what we call cattle call auditions, where you might have 400 people auditioning for an ensemble role or something. And they'll literally just type you out by either having you stand in a line and just being like, stay, go home, stay, go home. Or they might have you do like a really basic dance move just to like, again, type people out. I've been in that audition before. We had to do like 2 8 counts of a little tap combo, and they were typing us out that fast. Like I drove 6 hours to be in the room for 30 seconds, So Steph, I'll let you take on maybe what that feels like in the room too.
Yeah. And just for context, the last thing Libby said, that's the life of a non-union actor. So the union for theater is Actors Equity Association. But yeah, I mean, you really nailed it, Libby. So I contributed to this book by DeFear Jackson called Theater While Fat. It was a bunch of us fat actors. We all answered like the same questions. And in that book, I personally think I made my best quote-worthy statement ever. And that was, typecasting is a 2-dimensional model for 3-dimensional people. We're people. We're not supposed to be put into boxes. We shouldn't look at someone and say, we should say, maybe that's an introverted, insightful person. Maybe they would play Jo March in Little Women based off of the essence. While there is definitely more of a move towards essence-based casting, it still has a long way to go. But something I did want to add was that there was this other book that I was interviewed for called Broadway Bodies, A Critical History of Conformity. And it does describe that body that Libby was talking about. But what's interesting is like there's this expectation for all of us to have this Broadway body, but if you want to play more character roles, there might be an expectation for you to be like plumper or bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can't be in between. Like there are a lot of, even
it's like modeling.
like for a lot of like, yeah, I was going to say for like mid-size actors, they'll be told in a master class or something, or by an agent or someone, you know, if you want to play the ingenue, you're going to have to lose 20 pounds. If you want to play the character actor, you know, the supporting evil, sassy character, you have to gain 20 pounds.
Wow. Yeah.
The sidekick.
Yeah. So again, it's typecasting. It just, it really minimizes us as people. So, yeah.
So it's also a thing in particularly professional theater where when they're casting understudies or standbys, that they want someone who is really the same size as the person that's typically in that role. So if they need to jump into their costume, they're able to do that. So even, you know, this is not the person who's on every day, but they need to have the same body type and height and stuff so that they can just get into their costume. I think some shows are giving them their own costumes, but not all of them.
Although I would say, if the actor is bigger, they'll make accommodations for a smaller actor if they're an understudy or a swing or an alternate. So a great example would be with the Funny Girl Broadway revival. You know, Beanie Feldstein at the time was plus size, but Julie Benko, who's incredible, who was the standby, and then the alternate, she's in a smaller body, and you know they made those accommodations for her. You know, and what I'm saying is not against her.
The other way around. Yeah.
But it's interesting how the accommodations will be made for a smaller actor, but not for someone who is larger.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about costuming and what that feels like, is like?
I have nothing against costumers at all. Costume designers, I think they're just trying to do their job as best as they can. And from what I understand, they're not union protected, which makes me wonder if that's one of the reasons like why it's harder for accommodations to be made. But yeah, I do know that there have been like certain audition notices where it would say, like for the Wicked National Tour, it would say like Fiyero has to be 5'11". I don't know why, because Norbert Leo Butz, who originated the role, was 5'7". So why are they consistently asking for this like tall, and with that we can read between the lines that they want someone who's like lean / muscular. So yeah, there's definitely expectations to fit into it. But as far as like my experience, it's been such a long time.
So I actually wrote a blog post about this for the BroadwayDietitian.com about working with costumers, especially if you're in recovery from an eating disorder, because it can be so triggering. You know, not only are people like touching you to, you know, not in a weird way, but like, you know, they need to measure you and stuff, but they're measuring you and they're asking, you know, they might be asking your sizes or weight, you know, you might see the measurement. So I like to tell people, you know, really be upfront with your costumers and say like, I can't see these numbers. I know you need to take them to do like they need the numbers to make the costumes fit you. But tell them that you can't see the numbers. I would suggest telling them that if you're in recovery or if body image is a thing for you, if you're planning on gaining or losing weight as a part of recovery or something, so that they're making accommodations within those costumes. But kind of the process of getting into a show, and my experience comes more from community regional theater. I haven't been on Broadway yet. But it would be usually they're asking up front for measurements, or they're taking measurements on you. So if you're submitting them in yourself, like I've had to do for some community theaters, they'll ask you exactly which measurements you need. I know a lot of actors have size cards as well, they're called. And this is, I think, seen a lot more for film acting. You keep all of your measurements up to date, including shoe sizes and hat sizes and everything. So if you get called in to be an extra in a TV show, like they can pull costumes from their rack really quickly because you have your updated measurements. But then going into costume for a theater production, you know, depending on if they are pulling clothes they already have, you'll be trying stuff on. If they're making things new for you, they'll really be taking measurements. They'll probably make a muslin test garment first to make sure it's going to fit and lay properly before they use the final costumes. You'll need to look at what undergarments are going to work with the costume to make sure everything stays where it's supposed to and is covered and all of that stuff and doesn't show. And as you know, female presenting people, we're also wearing tights on stage all the time. Like there's very few roles, I think, that you would be bare-legged in a show as a female, especially for the more traditional shows. Sometimes wearing multiple layers of tights. I've had to do that before, where you're like doubling, tripling up. And if you have quick costume changes, you might be, pulling one pair off and have another one under it. If you have to like change colors, like if you're going from black to nude or something like that. So you can end up with a lot of layers on just because of quick changes as well. And then quick changes in the wings. So dressers are going to be the people that are standing just off stage helping with quick changes, helping, in the dressing rooms as well, helping with changes and maybe changing wigs and things like that. So costumes are going to need to be easy to get on and off. You might have this, elaborate period piece thing that if you were to wear it in real life would be 5 layers and laces and buttons and all these things. In theater, magic of theater, we got Velcro, we got snaps. It goes on and off in seconds, so you can change.
Yeah, I did have to get costuming for something last year, and before that happened, before like everyone was using Ozempic to lose 20 pounds, I was able to, I had access to one pen for my type 2 diabetes, which it was designed for, by the way, people. But I had lost some weight because that's what it does. And then when the costume designer was putting on my stuff, they said, "You got skinny." And I was like, I kind of wish she didn't. And I didn't say anything. I was like, "Oh man, I wish you didn't say that." Just because, again, we don't know why someone has lost weight. I'll tell you, when I was in high school, I was really depressed and I wasn't really eating and I had lost weight. And my acting teacher noticed. They're like, "Oh wow, you lost a lot of weight," or not a lot, but like, "Oh wow," like they're saying it like an impressive way. Sure. And then I remember telling a family member who also commented on my weight loss, and I said I was too depressed to eat. And they're like, "Oh wow, I wish I had that problem."
Yeah.
So never compliment someone's weight loss. You don't know what they're going through.
Yeah. When it comes to talking about bodies in theater, I take a more body neutral approach. Like, what does your body do for you as a performer? But either way, that was just what I was going to say.
Yeah. We've heard a lot about like Hollywood and Ozempic, but truly until now, I'm like, obviously theater. Are either of you comfortable saying just a bit about how that has impacted, costuming and, sizing and casting and stuff?
I have no idea if Ozempic is being used by people on Broadway. I think it's more of a Hollywood thing, but I could be wrong. I mean, it is very hard.
I'm sure it is, but my theory, I don't know specifically, my theory would be they would be doing this, at least initially, when they're not currently in a show, because if they're having rapid weight changes, they're going to get cut from a show. Like, you have to be really steady. Like, once you're cast and costumed and all of that stuff, they're going to want you to maintain a really steady weight. They're not going to want it going up and down. So like, even if you're losing weight, they don't want you to continue losing weight. They cast you at the size they cast you at for a reason. And they want you to stay at that size for the whole run of the show, which contracts can be 6, 12 months longer. They can also be a lot shorter, but I think like the average Broadway contract is maybe like 6 months or so.
I had read there were challenges for women who were playing Tracy Turnblad in Hairspray because they were doing a lot more dancing than usual. A lot of them were losing weight. And if I remember correctly, for Marissa Janet Winokur, I believe the producers were saying like, "Hey, you need to keep your weight the same." But she's like, "Okay, but I'm doing all this extra dancing that I don't normally, do." I mean, like, I'm not saying that like these people were not like physically active or anything to begin with, but like like 8 times a week, that's a lot for anybody.
Well, that's a big part of my passion for the nutrition for theater, because particularly musical theater, 8 shows a week, your typical dancey show, like, you are, and I hate saying it this way, but I can't think of a better way right now, you're burning a lot of calories. It's a lot of movement. It's a lot of energy required to do this. And, you got to refuel. You got to be fueled properly going into it, so you have those energy stores, not only just to get through and maintain weight and all the things we've already talked about, but electrolytes. If you're, we're thinking like, okay, dance, we could being dietitians, like we could calculate like how much energy someone is using doing an hour of dance, blah, blah, blah. But you're not taking into account stage lights are freaking hot. You are sweating buckets that you would not do in a studio. You add in heavy costumes. That's adding weight. That's adding heat. If you are not getting enough breaks during that, it's really easy to go into heat stroke. So we need to be keeping up electrolytes. I love having sports beverages backstage for dance heavy shows because we need to be consuming carbs and electrolytes throughout, staying hydrated because it's so easy to lose electrolytes and water just from pure sweat and breathing and all of that stuff. So even if it's not super, super active, like it's intense workout. These are athletes. I call them theater athletes.
And also there's some shows where like the main character is on the stage like 85 to 95% of the show. Like maybe except for not counting intermission.
Sure.
Like or sometimes they're on the stage during intermission, like a parade.
Parade. That was so intense.
Like they don't even get a break. Like they barely have a break to go to the bathroom. So I imagine like, and I think sometimes maybe the run crew, like I guess, those are people that are like helping everything stay, not become chaotic. I think they might sometimes have like liquids on hand if they arrange that maybe. Yeah. Once someone was doing a quick change and someone was like putting the straw in their mouth. So they got
I've done that as a dresser. When I was a dresser for Next to Normal, my Diana, I did all of her quick changes, and I also would come with her water and tea every time she ran off stage. Like we'd get the costume changing, and as soon as we got to a point where I could like start zipping her up or whatever, I'd hand her water, and then I'd go around and zip and fix and everything, and then she'd hand me the water back and run back on stage. So it's totally a thing. If actors are going to be stuck on stage, they might hide water in like a prop cup. So you might see like, oh, they have teacups on stage because that's part of the staging. And they might actually be drinking some water out of that to stay hydrated. It might not be fake air stuff like you're thinking it is.
Fake air. Yes.
Fake air. Weird.
We're good. We know what we're talking about. Yeah. See, there you go. As a dietitian who's worked in, sports with athletes, a lot of it I think would be easier because there are daytime events. They're morning, they're afternoon, they're in the day. Right now I'm thinking of all of the shows at nighttime, and already with society's narrative of like, you don't eat after whatever, or, your dinner is before the show, so you don't have to eat another meal. Like this is me guessing, but what's the realities there?
We did actually a really great Instagram live with No More 10 out of 12s about some of this stuff as well. What I'm typically seeing with people who are doing shows at night, that I don't love, but seems to be more the reality, is a lot of people, especially dancers, don't like to perform on a full stomach. They don't want to have dinner before the show, or they don't want to eat very much before the show. Which also will tie into like digestive upset. And I'd love to talk about that too. But a lot of people are eating after the show. I think with kind of the skewed hours that a typical theater person has, I haven't really heard anyone talking about like some magic cutoff hour for eating, because they might be waking up a lot later. So like their whole day is shifted, or, things are shifted around. So usually they're eating their dinner after the show. And that can be also complicated because, if we're dealing with things like acid reflux, people are going to bed shortly after, or they have long commutes to get home. Like within New York City, a lot of the actors actually live like in New Jersey or Long Island or Brooklyn, and they have long commutes home. Could be hour, 2 hours to get home. So if they're waiting until they get home to eat, then, so let's say they leave theater at 11, they get home at midnight, then they start making food, shower, wind down, all that stuff. They're not getting to bed till 2 a.m. And then, hopefully they don't have a day job that they have to get up early in the morning, or kids that are waking them up at 6 a.m. to get going. Hopefully they can sleep in a reasonable amount of time, not typically. And then their day gets started again. So what some actors do is then they're going to go out to eat in the theater district right after, which, from a time point and an all foods fit point, cool, love it. But at that time of night, when we're talking 11, 12, 1 a.m., pretty much all that's left open is like the bars and pub food. So we're not getting a lot of options. We're not getting a lot of fresh produce. Maybe not the things you want to have right before you go to sleep. Again, nothing wrong with any of these foods. We just don't necessarily want them, right after or right when we're going to go to sleep. And after all that work and everything, we want to really be replenishing the muscles and everything. So what I encourage a lot of people to do is try to pack snacks and meals and, at least something to tide them over until they get home and can have the rest of stuff, have things prepped. So when they get home, they can either have something like cold right out of the fridge or something that all they have to do is heat and eat, because that is a really big problem. And I think, the other flip side of that is the other problem I see is not being fueled going into a performance or rehearsal for fear of digestive issues or bloat, or just feeling heavy, going into a performance.
Stephanie, can you tell me more about digestive issues in the theater?
That's what I can tell you. well, as you know, for people who have like eating disorders, digestive issues can be crazy. I'm not going to go. I'm going to spare you the details for me, but like I would be terrified to be on the stage right now because at any moment. I think Kristen Chenoweth once said when she was in Wicked, playing Glinda, she like said something to Idina Menzel. She's like, I have to shit or something like that. I don't remember what happened, but I was like, and she's wearing this beautiful yellow dress or something. Mm-hmm. Like, but I've heard of actors like go on diets midway through a show. Like maybe I heard someone I know, like they tried to go vegan and they were pooping a lot. And I think they might have felt the need to go while they were on stage. Mm-hmm. So I think it's another great reason why, actors should consult with a dietitian so that way they don't, end up destroying their costume unintentionally.
Right. This is a huge passion area of mine, which is I really never thought I would get into like digestive nutrition because it's like not really like a frontal interest of mine. But this is exactly what I hear from people is, they have whatever pre-existing digestive stuff they got going on. So IBS, ulcerative colitis, GERD, like whatever's going on there, right? So we got to really think through, like if they have a particular digestive system, a lot of people don't. Some people can just kind of eat whatever, whenever and go and they're fine. I'm looking at all you high school boys. but, some people have more delicate digestive systems. And this is again where I really think taking a sports nutrition approach is so important because we're looking at timing of foods and what foods are causing the digestive upset and how can we mold this in so that they're able to make it through a show without feeling the need to run off stage while being fueled. I think it really comes down to doing kind of your prep work. So when you're in rehearsals, when you're in dance classes or just living your everyday life, start trial and error with food. Like see by eating different things and different combinations of things and different amounts of things, what makes you feel good and what makes you have digestive problems. And figure out kind of the timeline of those things. Like I will heavily suggest that people avoid really fibrous foods within a couple hours of performing. Sure. Fiber gives us gas, gives us bloat, makes us need to poop. So we want to, that's great to have after the show or in the morning, like fiber at breakfast, fiber for your late night dinner. Love it. Pre-show, we want to be going with more of our simple carbs, some protein, some fat. We want to have a nice, slow, steady, not only blood sugar, but we don't want to be creating anything too crazy going on digestively. Like, please don't eat a bunch of beans before you go on stage, both for your sake and for the rest of the actors around you. Because, again, we also need to stay in character. So if someone starts stinking up the stage, you can't be making a face of it.
I did hear that Mariah Rose Faith, who played Regina George in the National Tournament Mean Girls, she has IBS. She's very open about it. Like she makes TikToks about it. And she actually told me they have made accommodations to choreography where she might have to be flipped upside down or something just in case there's a flare up. Ooh. So Broadway is getting a little bit better and national theater is getting better about making accommodations for those things. So that's good to know.
All right. On that note, I would love to hear about Broadway BOPO and how the two of you collaborate in the work that you do, Stephanie.
Yeah, so I'm coming on my 5 years of Broadway BOPO, like in a few days, I think, actually. Oh, I should do something about that.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it was a very slow start because I had no idea what I was doing. I still have no idea what I'm doing, like, honestly.
Yeah.
But I was always open to people reaching out to me, and one day I got a message from Libby, and she was all about what I was doing. And from there, we did a Zoom conversation, and then we went to Broadway Con together as vendors. And so Broadway Con is like the premier convention for all things Broadway and theater. Like Broadway stars go there. It's a pretty
Comic-Con, but it's all Broadway. I've never been to Comic-Con, but I think that's like the vibe.
Yeah, and like there actually is cosplay there, like Broadway cosplay.
Yeah,
really
like
cool.
Attendees, Broadway fans will dress up as like their favorite Broadway characters, and
what's cool is that you'll see people in all different body types playing the characters they play, even if that's not how they're originally portrayed, which is really cool. But then we eventually started we weren't presenting together, but we were going to Broadway Con again. Like, you did like a lecture.
Yeah. Nutrition for performers. I can't remember. Like body positive nutrition for performers, something like that.
Yeah. And then Broadway Con actually reached out to me to create a panel about body liberation on Broadway. And then me and my friend, Marcus Alexander, we both led a body positive audition masterclass where we focused on behaviors and habits that actors in marginalized bodies may face because of the systemic discrimination and internalized fat phobia. But also it's something that Libby and I have been like talking about for the longest time is like for Libby to create a curriculum for these universities about performance nutrition, because and every time I reach out to a college or I get invited to speak, I bring it up and the students are like, yeah, actually we really want that.
Yeah.
I will say that's something.
Stephanie and I are each other's biggest promoters as well. I think we believe in each other so much that we're always sharing about each other in the room. I think that's a really cool thing about our friendship too.
Yeah. Like I think just even for this podcast, I think I was like, yeah, we got to bring on Libby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, actually I do have to reach out to NYU because I was invited to speak to their theater changemakers lab. It's like these students that are trying to bring like social change to theater. Sure. I was there to speak about INT 0209, which is a bill in New York City that now prohibits height and size discrimination for employment, public housing, and accommodations. But there, I asked the students like, what do you think about what's your nutrition experience like? Like, what could improve? And like they said, yeah, we'd love to have a dietitian who actually like understands our specific needs and isn't going to push diet culture on us. Something I've been wanting to do is, in response to my horrendous experiences with summer intensives, I would like to create my own intensive. Which is just like a 1 week musical theater training experience where like they get a private voice lesson, they do like a dance master class, a singing master class, maybe they get coaching in like pop and rock music, and then at the end they get to showcase themselves for like people in the industry. And I'm not speaking crap about all these intensives. Actually, a lot of them are fantastic. I'm really just talking about like one intensive that really traumatized me. But like I want to create one that's rooted in body liberation. And something I'd want to have is a dietitian there for like private sessions. And like at the beginning, they do like a consultation and talk. And by the end of the week, they have like a plan, not a meal plan. I just mean like a plan to prepare themselves for all the scenarios they need. Just like we need more diversity amongst the performers, we need more diversity amongst like faculty and educators. And like I'd be hiring people that these students could relate to.
I think that faculty of places. So again, great teachers everywhere, but something that keeps coming up when I'm speaking to students that have been through college programs for theater and dance is I don't even want to say lack of nutrition education they're getting, like the horrible nutrition education they're getting, because usually I'm just going to go with old dance teachers are the ones that are telling them how to eat and putting them on these horrendous diets for like 10-year-old ballerinas, not for 20-something athletic musical theater folks, The diet culture is heavily seeped still in these programs for the most part. I'm not sure if I know some of the first things that we collaborated on was talking to schools that were still doing mandatory weigh-ins of the students in their dance and theater programs. I'm not sure if they've all stopped yet. You might know more about that, but that's been, a really big thing of schools were literally kicking students out of these, BFA, MFA programs because they were not staying under a certain weight, kind of regardless of their height, and so they were creating eating disorders amongst these students and telling them that they would never be cast if they didn't keep their weight this low. So just bashing down their creativity, their passion.
It was specifically the Ann Lacey School of Dance and Entertainment at Oklahoma City University that got rid of their weigh-ins, I think, last year or the year before. Unfortunately, though, I've heard that the mindset has not changed. Like, a lot of schools also used to just have cuts. At my school, it was called redirection. Like, they would basically send you to another major, like, try this instead, But even though a lot of those schools have stopped doing that, that doesn't mean that the professors have deconstructed their bigotry or or biases. That's something that could take a while, especially because they've been doing it for so long. So I do feel that sometimes these leaders are more receptive to body liberation and being anti-diet culture because they're seeing the social movement happening, and they kind of don't want to be behind the times. So sometimes I don't always feel like it's sincere, and that does concern me, especially because if our culture were to go in a different direction. I mean, we've kind of seen a resurgence in thin being in, and with the Ozempic, so it's it's challenging.
Totally. Can you tell people where to find you both?
Yeah. For Broadway Body Positivity Project, it's just Broadway BOPO for short. TikTok, Instagram, that's where I am primarily. I am on Threads and Twitter. I call it, it's Twitter. Pretty much that's it for me.
Cool. Libby, what about you?
Yeah, so you can find me at the Broadway Dietitian on Instagram and BroadwayDietitian.com. I'd say I'm mostly on Instagram. I have a couple different YouTube channels. So if you want just straight up nutrition education, that's through my old business name. So Not Your Average Nutritionist. You can search that on YouTube. And then I'm doing more vlog style and a little more on the performance stuff. The Broadway Dietitian, if you just Google that, you'll find out me in all the places.
Thank you both so much for coming on today. This was great. Thanks again to Stephanie and Libby. Stephanie brought up that New York City law, and next week you'll hear my conversation with Tigress Osborne, the executive director of the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. We'll hear about the organization's work to pass the law. We also get into Ozempic, Big Pharma, and the money behind the messages that are supposed to be about health. I'll also ask what people can do to organize and get involved in passing similar size inclusive legislation where you all live. Until then, keep making it awkward. This has been Making It Awkward. I've been your host, Jessica Wilson. This podcast is a production of The Body Politic. It gets its support from Patreon members and the legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services. It is edited and mixed by the wonderful Jen Jacobs.